It was a quiet afternoon at a luxury car dealership. The showroom was filled with expensive cars and well-dressed customers. The manager stood confidently, thinking he knew exactly who belonged there. A man walked in, dressed casually in jeans, a jacket, and a red MAGA hat. He looked around, scanning the showroom with interest. The moment the manager saw him, his expression changed. He didn't see a customer. He only saw the hat. And in that instant, he made a decision he would soon regret. Because the man he was about to kick out was none other than Elon Musk. It was a bright afternoon at one of Los Angeles' most luxurious car dealerships. The showroom was spacious, with high ceilings, polished marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that allowed the sunlight to shine over the sleek sports cars on display. Customers walked around, admiring the latest models, while sales representatives in tailored suits discussed deals with wealthy buyers. A man walked in, dressed casually in jeans, a dark jacket, and a red MAGA hat. His hands were tucked into his pockets as he scanned the room, his eyes moving from one car to another. He walked with an easy confidence, but there was nothing about him that immediately suggested wealth or status. At the front of the showroom, a middle-aged man in a crisp gray suit stood behind the reception desk. He was the dealership's manager, a man who had spent years catering to the rich and famous. His sharp eyes immediately locked onto the new visitor. But instead of seeing a potential customer, he saw the red hat. His expression tightened. He whispered something to a nearby salesperson who stole a quick glance at the man before nodding and walking away. The manager took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and walked forward with a forced smile. "Excuse me, sir," he said in a polite but firm tone, stepping into the man's path. "Can I help you with something?" The man stopped and looked at him, nodding slightly. "Just browsing," he said simply, his voice calm. He took another step toward a sleek black sports car parked near the center of the showroom. The manager's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "I'm sorry, but this is a high-end dealership. We deal with serious buyers only." The man raised an eyebrow but didn't respond right away. He simply glanced at the car again, running a hand along the smooth surface of the hood. The manager's patience thinned. "We don't allow—" He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "We don't usually entertain customers who don't fit the usual profile." The man looked up. "And what profile is that?" The manager's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, let's just say that most of our clients have a certain level of sophistication." He motioned to the well-dressed customers in the room who were either in expensive suits or designer outfits. The man let out a small chuckle. "So, you're saying I don't belong here?" The manager gave him a tight smile. "I'm just saying that maybe this isn't the right place for you." For a brief moment, there was silence. A few customers had started to take notice of the exchange, glancing over in curiosity. The salespeople nearby had also paused, sensing the tension in the air. The man gave a small nod and sighed. "Well, that's too bad. I was actually thinking of buying a few cars today." The manager's expression didn't change, but his tone became even more dismissive. "We don't usually take window shoppers seriously, and if I'm being honest, sir, with that hat, I doubt you're the type of customer we cater to." A few people nearby exchanged looks. The room had gone quiet. The man slowly took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. Then he smiled. "Interesting," he said, his voice still calm. "Do you know who I am?" The manager smirked. "I know exactly who you are," he said with confidence. "You're someone who walked into the wrong place. Now, I don't want to be rude, but we have real customers to attend to." The man nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone. With a few taps on the screen, he made a call. He didn't say much, just a simple instruction. "I'm at the dealership. Send them over." The manager raised an eyebrow. "Send who over?" The man simply smiled and put his phone back in his pocket. He glanced at the cars once more as if making a final decision. "You'll see," he said. A few minutes passed. The manager had started to walk away when the dealership's glass doors swung open. A group of men in suits entered. They looked professional, serious, and purposeful. The lead man, a tall figure with neatly combed hair, walked straight up to the man in the MAGA hat and nodded respectfully. "Mr. Musk, everything is ready." The manager's face paled. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. A few customers gasped. One of the salespeople near the back nearly dropped the set of keys he was holding. The man, the one the manager had just tried to kick out, was Elon Musk. Elon turned back to the manager, tilting his head slightly. "So, do I still not fit the profile?" The manager swallowed hard. "Mr. Musk, I didn't realize—" Elon held up a hand. "No need for excuses." He glanced at the lead man who had just arrived. "Buy out the dealership." The room fell into complete silence. The manager's eyes widened. "Sir?" "You heard me," Elon said casually. "Every car in here. Buy them all, and then fire him." He nodded toward the manager. The manager's face drained of color. "Mr. Musk, please, I made a mistake." Elon shrugged. "Yeah, you did. Maybe next time don't judge people by what they wear." The lead man nodded and turned to his team. "Get the paperwork started." Within minutes, the entire atmosphere of the showroom changed. Salespeople were scrambling, calling for contracts, preparing for what was likely the largest sale the dealership had ever made. Customers watched in awe, whispering amongst themselves. The manager stood frozen, realizing that in just a few moments he had lost everything. Elon placed the MAGA hat back on his head, gave a small smile, and turned to leave. As he walked out the door, he said over his shoulder, "Thanks for your time." And with that, he was gone. The air inside the luxurious showroom was crisp, with the faint scent of new leather and polished chrome filling the space. The atmosphere was one of exclusivity. Gleaming sports cars stood under bright showroom lights, their sleek designs reflecting on the spotless marble floor. Conversations hummed softly in the background. Sales representatives discussing high-end features with well-dressed clients, a couple admiring a luxury SUV, and a young influencer filming a walkthrough of the dealership's latest arrivals. Then something changed. It started with a shift in body language. A tall, middle-aged man in a sharp gray suit, the dealership's manager, had been watching the entrance with narrowed eyes, and his gaze had settled on a particular customer. A man in jeans, a dark jacket, and a red MAGA hat. The manager's jaw tightened. His expression, once polished and professional, flickered with irritation before he smoothed it over with a forced smile. He whispered something to a nearby salesperson, who glanced at the customer, gave a small nod, and then quietly stepped aside as if distancing himself from what was about to unfold. The manager straightened his tie, adjusted his cuffs, and strode forward. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he approached, his expression locked in a careful balance between condescension and politeness. The man in the red hat had been leisurely walking through the showroom, running his hand along the sleek body of a black sports car, examining it with quiet interest. He seemed unbothered, moving at his own pace, unaware or perhaps uninterested in the judgmental eyes following him. The manager cleared his throat. "Excuse me, sir." His voice was light, polite, but there was an unmistakable edge beneath it. The man in the MAGA hat turned slightly, looking up from the car he was admiring. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement, his face unreadable. The manager's smile stayed fixed, but his eyes betrayed something colder. "I just wanted to check. Are you lost?" A couple nearby who had been looking at an SUV turned their heads at the remark. A young salesperson, in the middle of explaining features to another customer, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Even the influencer, previously focused on filming content for his social media, angled his camera slightly, sensing something worth capturing. The man in the red hat simply raised an eyebrow. "Lost?" The manager gave a small chuckle, though it was devoid of any real amusement. "Yes, I mean, this dealership caters to a very specific clientele." His eyes flicked briefly to the hat before returning to the man's face. Perhaps a different establishment would be a better fit. The words were carefully chosen, but the meaning was clear. The silence stretched for a moment. A faint tension rippled through the room. The man didn't react with anger or frustration. He simply studied the manager with quiet curiosity, as if trying to decide whether this was worth his time. Then he spoke, his voice calm, steady. "Oh?" he said. "And what type of customer would that be?" The manager hesitated just for a moment, as if considering his next move. By now, more people had noticed. A salesman near the front desk subtly stepped closer, pretending to check something on his tablet, but very much tuned in. A woman in a tailored suit, likely another high-spending customer, lowered her sunglasses, watching from a few feet away. Even the influencer had stopped pretending and was now openly filming the exchange. The manager's smile faltered ever so slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Well," he began, his tone still smooth, "let's just say we specialize in high-end luxury cars, and our usual clientele reflects a certain level of refinement." The man in the MAGA hat turned slightly, looking up from the car he was admiring. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement, his face unreadable. The manager's smile stayed fixed, but his eyes betrayed something colder. "I just wanted to check, are you lost?" A couple nearby who had been looking at an SUV turned their heads at the remark. A young salesperson, in the middle of explaining features to another customer, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Even the influencer, previously focused on filming content for his social media, angled his camera slightly, sensing something worth capturing. The man in the red hat simply raised an eyebrow. "Lost?" The manager gave a small chuckle, though it was devoid of any real amusement. "Yes, I mean, this dealership caters to a very specific clientele." His eyes flicked briefly to the hat before returning to the man's face. "Perhaps a different establishment would be a better fit." The words were carefully chosen, but the meaning was clear. The silence stretched for a moment. A faint tension rippled through the room. The man didn't react with anger or frustration. He simply studied the manager with quiet curiosity, as if trying to decide whether this was worth his time. Then he spoke, his voice calm, steady. "Oh," he said, "and what type of customer would that be?" The manager hesitated just for a moment, as if considering his next move. By now, more people had noticed. A salesman near the front desk subtly stepped closer, pretending to check something on his tablet, but very much tuned in. A woman in a tailored suit, likely another high-spending customer, lowered her sunglasses, watching from a few feet away. Even the influencer had stopped pretending and was now openly filming the exchange. The manager's smile faltered ever so slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Well," he began, his tone still smooth, "let's just say we specialize in high-end luxury cars, and our usual clientele reflects a certain level of refinement." The man in the MAGA hat tilted his head, considering the words. His lips curled into the slightest hint of amusement. "So, you're saying I don't fit that level?" The manager exhaled, clearly growing impatient. "I'm just saying that our customers tend to have a particular appearance, a certain sophistication. And if I may be direct, sir, your—" He glanced at the hat again. "Choice of style may not align with the kind of experience we provide here." There it was. The barely concealed dismissal. The couple near the SUV exchanged glances. The influencer zoomed in, capturing every expression, every shift in body language. Still, the man in the red hat remained unfazed. "Interesting," he murmured, his tone thoughtful. He looked around, as if taking in the full scene, the showroom, the salespeople, the expensive cars lined up like trophies. Then he turned back to the manager, his expression neutral, but his words carrying a quiet weight. "Tell me," he said, "do you always judge your customers by what they wear?" The manager scoffed slightly, folding his arms. "We don't judge, sir. We simply ensure that we provide the best service to those who are serious about our cars." A few feet away, a hushed whisper passed between two salesmen. One of them leaned in slightly, murmuring something under his breath. The other frowned, then glanced at the man in the MAGA hat with a sudden look of realization. But the manager didn't notice. He was too busy maintaining his air of superiority. The man in the hat nodded slowly. "Got it," he said simply. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he made a quick call. A brief pause. Then he spoke into the receiver. "Yeah, I'm at the dealership. Send them over." The manager raised an eyebrow, his confidence unwavering. "Send who over?" The man slipped his phone back into his pocket. "You'll see." The room remained silent for a few beats. Then, the showroom doors swung open. A group of sharply dressed individuals stepped inside. Suits, polished shoes, businesslike expressions. They moved with precision, scanning the room before locking eyes on the man in the red hat. One of them, a tall figure with neatly combed hair, walked up and gave a respectful nod. "Mr. Musk, everything is prepared." A ripple of shock moved through the showroom. A salesperson audibly gasped. The couple near the SUV stared, wide-eyed. The influencer's mouth fell open, his camera still rolling. The manager's face drained of color. He barely managed to form a word. "Mr. Musk?" Elon Musk turned back to him, tilting his head slightly. "So, do I still not fit the profile?" The manager opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked completely thrown off, his confidence crumbling in an instant. "Sir, I didn't realize—" Elon held up a hand, cutting him off. "No need for excuses." Then he turned to the man who had just entered. "Buy out the dealership." The entire showroom fell into stunned silence. The manager staggered slightly. "Sir? You heard?" "Me," Elon said, his tone light but firm. "Every car in here. Buy them all, and then fire him." He nodded toward the manager. A stunned murmur spread through the crowd. The manager stammered, his polished demeanor completely gone. "Mr. Musk, please, I made a mistake." Elon adjusted his hat. "Yeah, you did." He gave a small, almost amused nod. "Maybe next time don't judge people by what they wear." The lead businessman gave a nod to his team. "Get the paperwork started." The entire dealership buzzed with movement. Salespeople scrambled, contracts were pulled, and phones rang in urgent conversations. The manager stood frozen, realizing he had just lost everything. Elon turned, heading toward the exit. As he reached the door, he glanced back. "Thanks for your time." And with that, he walked out. The air inside the showroom grew heavier. Conversations that once filled the space had dwindled, replaced by an uneasy silence as the tension between the manager and the man in the red MAGA hat thickened. The showroom's bright lights cast a sharp gleam on the luxury cars, their polished surfaces reflecting the unfolding scene. The manager, standing with his arms crossed, took a step closer, his expression shifting from forced politeness to something more dismissive. His lips curled into a smirk, a self-satisfied gleam in his eyes, as if he had just exposed an unwelcome guest. His voice, now louder and more pointed, cut through the quiet hum of the dealership. "Let's just say we don't want divisive individuals in our store. We have a reputation to maintain." A hush fell over the showroom. A few feet away, a salesperson pretending to be busy scrolling on his tablet tensed. A couple who had been admiring an SUV exchanged wary glances. Even the young influencer, still holding up his phone to record discreetly, widened his eyes at the boldness of the statement. Elon Musk, the man in the red hat, remained still. His expression did not waver. If anything, there was a faint curiosity in his eyes, as if he were observing an experiment unfold in real time. He didn't lash out. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at the manager with an almost amused detachment, as if he had seen this kind of arrogance before and knew exactly where it would lead. The tension in the room became palpable. A nearby employee, a young woman in a crisp blazer, shifted her weight uncomfortably, her gaze flicking between Elon and the manager. She recognized what was happening. This was beyond a standard customer interaction. The manager, blinded by his own assumptions, was making a mistake. A costly one. Yet, the manager continued, emboldened by his own words. "You understand, right?" he pressed, as if daring Elon to argue. "We cater to a different kind of clientele, a higher class, a more sophisticated group, people who align with our values. And, quite frankly, sir, you don't." He made no effort to hide the way his eyes flicked toward the red hat, his disdain practically dripping from every word. Elon raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly, not in anger, but in amusement. The silence in the room deepened. More people were paying attention now. Employees stood a little straighter, their ears tuned in. A couple who had been whispering about lease options now openly watched, their paperwork forgotten. A subtle tension played out among the staff. Some appeared indifferent, while others exchanged uneasy glances, as if unsure whether to step in. A younger salesman standing behind the front desk took a small step forward before thinking better of it. He had just recognized who the man in the red hat was. His lips parted slightly as if wanting to interrupt, but the words died in his throat. Meanwhile, the influencer capturing the exchange on video had stopped pretending to browse cars. His phone was now firmly pointed at the confrontation, recording everything. Elon tilted his head slightly, his calm demeanor unchanged. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his tone smooth, devoid of any visible frustration. "You're saying I don't belong here because of a hat?" The manager scoffed, rolling his eyes as if it were the most ridiculous thing to pretend to misunderstand. "It's not just the hat, sir." His voice carried a self-righteous confidence. "It's what it represents. It's the kind of people it attracts. And frankly, we don't want that kind of energy in this establishment." He gestured toward the luxury cars surrounding them, as if they symbolized an unspoken standard, one he believed Elon Musk had failed to meet. Elon remained unfazed. If anything, his expression carried a quiet amusement, as though he were watching someone dig their own grave without realizing it. He glanced around the showroom, taking in the stunned expressions, the awkward shuffling of employees, and the growing tension in the air. Then he looked back at the manager. "And who, exactly, do you think I am?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time, a flicker of hesitation crossed the manager's face. He had assumed, judged, and dismissed, but had never once asked. Still, his arrogance wouldn't let him back down. "Someone who doesn't belong here, that much is clear." A low murmur rippled through the room. A couple of employees stiffened. One salesman, now visibly sweating, shifted his weight uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck as he glanced toward a colleague in silent alarm. A young female associate who had been standing near the reception desk leaned toward her coworker and whispered, "Does he not know?" The coworker swallowed hard. "I don't think so." Elon let the moment stretch, watching the realization begin to dawn in the expressions of those around him, everyone except the man in front of him. Then, with deliberate ease, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times and lifted it to his ear. The room held its breath. "Yeah," he said casually into the phone. "I'm at the dealership. Send them over." A brief pause. Then, he slipped his phone back into his pocket as if nothing had happened. The manager let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Send who over?" Elon smiled. "You'll see." The showroom doors swung open. A group of sharply dressed individuals entered. They carried an aura of importance, the kind that didn't need to be announced. They walked with purpose, their gazes scanning the room until they landed on Elon Musk. One of them, a man in a tailored navy suit, stepped forward and gave a respectful nod. "Mr. Musk, everything is prepared." The manager's face drained of color. A visible shift occurred in the showroom. Employees stiffened, eyes widening in shock. A salesperson audibly gasped. The influencer, still recording, nearly dropped his phone. Murmurs spread like wildfire. "Wait, did he just say Musk?" The manager's smirk vanished. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling. Mr. Musk?" His voice, once so assured, now wavered with panic. Elon, adjusting the brim of his red hat, turned back to face him. "So, do I still not fit your clientele?" The manager's mouth opened, then closed. The arrogance that had once defined his posture was gone, replaced by sheer panic. Elon let the silence drag. Then, with the same calm ease, he turned to the suited man who had just entered. "Buy out the dealership." A collective gasp rippled through the showroom. The manager staggered back slightly. "Sir?" Elon didn't look at him. "You heard me. Every car in here. Buy them all." He finally turned his gaze back to the manager, his voice still cool but carrying undeniable finality. "And fire him." A stunned murmur spread through the crowd. The manager's face turned pale. "Mr. Musk, please, I made a mistake." Elon adjusted his hat. "Yeah, you did." Then, with one final glance around the room, he nodded to his team. "Let's get started." And with that, the man in the red hat walked out, leaving behind a dealership in chaos and a manager who had just learned the cost of arrogance. The tension in the showroom had reached its peak. Employees stood frozen, their eyes darting between the manager and the man in the red hat. Customers who had been pretending not to listen were now fully invested in the confrontation. Some glanced at each other, silently questioning if they had heard correctly. The manager, who had just delivered his condescending remark, still held his smug posture, arms crossed over his chest. His expression screamed confidence, as if he had just put an unruly customer in his place. But then, a whisper changed everything. One of the younger salesmen standing near the front desk leaned in toward the manager. His face had lost all color, his hands slightly trembling as he cupped one around his mouth to keep his voice low. Sir, that's Elon Musk." At first, the manager didn't react. The words registered, but they didn't fully sink in. He blinked, tilting his head slightly, as if he had misheard. "What?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The salesman swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously toward the man in the red hat. "That's Elon Musk," he repeated more urgently this time. "The CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, Twitter, one of the richest men in the world." The weight of the words hit the manager like a freight train. His breath caught in his throat, his arms dropping slowly to his sides. The confidence that had carried him moments ago vanished instantly, replaced by pure, unfiltered panic. His heart pounded. He stared at the man in the hat, suddenly noticing the unmistakable features, the sharp gaze, the casual but unmistakably expensive clothing, the way he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. Oh no. A cold sweat broke out along the back of his neck. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. A wave of murmurs spread through the showroom like wildfire. Employees whispered to each other, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. One of the female associates at the reception desk covered her mouth in disbelief. A customer near the window turned to his wife and muttered, "Wait, is this really happening?" The influencer, who had been secretly recording, almost dropped his phone. His fingers tightened around the device as he hurriedly checked his footage, eyes wide with disbelief. Meanwhile, Elon Musk remained perfectly still. He had noticed the moment of realization hit, but he didn't react. His expression remained calm, his lips pressed together in something that almost resembled amusement. The manager's breath came in shallow gasps. He had just insulted, no, humiliated, one of the most powerful men in the world. A man who could, with a single decision, destroy his entire career. His mind raced. Damage control. Fix this. Say something. He took a shaky step forward, forcing an awkward, almost pained smile. "Mr. Musk, I had no idea. I mean, if I had known..." Elon finally spoke. "You didn't ask." The words were calm, almost casual, but they carried weight. A simple statement, yet it cut deeper than any long-winded reprimand ever could. The manager felt his knees go weak. The silence in the room was deafening. He knew, everyone knew, there was no talking his way out of this. An employee near the back coughed awkwardly, trying to suppress their nervous energy. The salesman who had whispered the truth looked like he wanted to disappear. The manager scrambled for words, his voice shaking slightly. "Sir, please, this was just a misunderstanding. He let out a nervous chuckle as if trying to brush off the situation. "I was just making a joke. A little misunderstanding, that's all." Elon didn't laugh. Instead, he adjusted the brim of his red hat and glanced toward the suited man who had entered moments ago, one of his assistants. "You brought the paperwork?" Elon asked him as if the manager no longer existed. The assistant gave a crisp nod and handed him a folder. "Everything's ready, Mr. Musk." The manager's stomach dropped. "Paperwork?" His throat went dry. "What paperwork?" Elon flipped through the folder with mild interest before looking up again. "I was planning to buy a few cars today." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "Maybe even invest in this dealership." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. The employees looked at each other, their faces filled with hope, as if this could be a golden opportunity. The manager's heart leaped in his chest. Yes, this is my chance. If Musk invested in the dealership, he could still salvage this, maybe even turn it around into a promotion. He straightened up, his voice suddenly eager. "Sir, that's wonderful. We would be honored to have you as an investor." Elon shut the folder and handed it back to his assistant. "Not anymore." The words shattered the manager's last hope. A dead silence settled over the room. Elon turned slightly, glancing at the stunned employees. "Who's the owner of this place?" A few hesitant glances were exchanged before someone mumbled, "He's not here today." Elon nodded. "Fine." He looked back at his assistant. "Find him." The assistant made a quick call. Within moments, he looked up and confirmed, "We can get him on a video call now." The manager's stomach twisted into knots. Elon, still calm, still perfectly composed, took his phone and tapped a few buttons. The call rang once, twice, before a face appeared on the screen, the dealership's owner. The manager could barely breathe. "Elon, what a surprise!" The owner's voice came through the speaker, cheerful and polite. "I wasn't expecting you to stop by today." Elon gave a small nod. "Yeah, me neither." There was a beat of silence. Then, Elon got straight to the point. "Your manager here just kicked me out." The owner's face paled. His expression shifted from cheerful to horrified in seconds. The manager felt like he was going to pass out. "Sir, please, The owner didn't even look at him. "Mr. Musk, I can't tell you how sorry I am. This is unacceptable." Elon let the silence drag. Then, in that same calm, collected voice, he simply said, "Fire him." The manager's knees buckled. "Sir, please." The owner, still shaken, nodded immediately. "Consider it done." And just like that, it was over. The employees stood frozen, watching their manager, the once arrogant, untouchable man, fall apart right in front of them. Elon gave a small nod and handed the phone back to his assistant. Then, adjusting his hat one last time, he turned toward the door. "Let's go." With that, he walked out, leaving behind a stunned dealership, a humiliated ex-manager, and an unforgettable lesson in humility. The tension in the showroom was thick, every eye locked onto the unfolding drama. The manager, who just moments ago had been brimming with arrogance, now stood frozen, his smug expression melting into uncertainty. Elon Musk, still calm, still composed, tilted his head slightly, studying the man in front of him. Then, instead of showing anger or frustration, he smiled. It wasn't a forced, awkward smile, nor was it one of amusement. It was the kind of smile that sent a clear message. He was in complete control. The showroom had fallen eerily silent. Employees, customers, and even a few passing bystanders outside the glass windows were all holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, with a hint of curiosity in his voice, Elon finally spoke. "So you judge customers by their hats? Interesting business model." The words were delivered lightly, but their weight was undeniable. A few muffled gasps could be heard among the employees. A couple of customers exchanged stunned looks. The manager swallowed hard, his face visibly paling. I, he stammered, scrambling for a response. His earlier confidence was gone. Now his hands fidgeted at his sides, his throat visibly constricting as he tried to come up with an explanation that wouldn't dig him deeper into the hole he had just created for himself. A few feet away, the young salesman who had recognized Elon earlier was barely able to contain his shock. His eyes darted from the manager to Musk, as if trying to process the sheer disaster that was unfolding. Meanwhile, phones were already recording. A few customers had discreetly pulled out their devices, capturing every second of what was quickly turning into an internet-worthy moment. The manager finally managed to blurt out, "Sir, I didn't mean any offense, it's just, company policy." Elon raised an eyebrow, as if mildly entertained by the excuse. "Company policy?" The manager nodded quickly, seizing the opportunity. Yes. We, tried to maintain a certain atmosphere, you see. A professional environment." The words sounded unconvincing even to himself. He could feel the weight of the stares from his employees, who knew full well that no such policy existed. Elon let the silence hang for a few moments, his expression unreadable. Then he casually turned away from the manager and toward a nearby salesman, a young man in his late 20s who had been standing stiffly at his station, looking like he wanted no part in the disaster unfolding. Elon pointed at him. "Do you work on commission?" The salesman, startled, took a second to process before quickly nodding. Yes, sir, I do." A small smile returned to Elon's face. "Great." He took a glance at the nearby cars, then said, "I'll take 3. But not from him. The words hit like a bomb. There was an audible gasp from the showroom. The employees standing near the front desk froze. The customers, who had been quietly observing, now had wide eyes, some covering their mouths in disbelief. And the manager? His face went completely white, his lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. His breathing became erratic, and for a brief moment, it looked like he might actually collapse from sheer panic. He realized his mistake. Too late. He had just kicked out the richest man in the world, mocked him. And now, instead of an investment, he had lost a massive sale right in front of his employees. The young salesman, still stunned, hesitated before clearing his throat. Thank you, sir. I'd be honored to help you." Elon nodded, completely ignoring the manager's presence now. "Good. Let's get started." The influencer who had been recording the entire scene nearly dropped his phone in excitement. "Dude, this is insane," he whispered under his breath, making sure his camera stayed focused on the chaos. The manager, in sheer desperation, took a shaky step forward. "Sir, please, I didn't mean to offend you. This is all a huge misunderstanding." Elon didn't even turn to look at him. He simply adjusted the brim of his red hat and gestured for the salesman to lead him to the paperwork. The ultimate payback wasn't yelling. It wasn't making a scene. It was letting the manager drown in the weight of his own arrogance. As Musk and the salesman walked away, the other employees shot awkward glances at their manager. Some looked at him with pity, others with silent satisfaction. After all, he had been difficult to work under for years. One of the receptionists muttered under her breath, "Karma." The manager took a shaky breath, his hands trembling at his sides. He knew. His career at this dealership was over. The moment Elon Musk turned and walked out of the dealership, a heavy silence fell over the showroom. For a few seconds, it was as if the entire world had stopped. The manager stood frozen, his face drained of color. He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps an attempt at damage control, but no words came out. His mind was spinning, trying to process the disastrous mistake he had just made. Customers in the showroom exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. Some shook their heads, others muttered to each other about what had just happened. A few even chuckled softly, amused by the poetic justice they had just witnessed. And then it started. A slow clap. It was hesitant at